The arena buzzed with the hum of machinery, the whirring sound of advanced weaponry echoing through the vast chamber. Galactic soldiers, their imposing frames wrapped in strength-enhancing armor, lined the metallic walls. Each stood like a living monument to their civilization's might, plasma rifles slung over their shoulders, and confidence gleaming in their eyes. Among them, Commander Zovak towered over his subordinates, watching as the humans entered, a small group amidst the grandeur of alien technology. The humans walked in silence, their presence almost insignificant in the overwhelming expanse of the arena. At the front, Captain Liu, a young, sharp-eyed representative of Earth, stood tall, his military uniform crisp but simple in comparison to the glistening armor around him. Behind him, a lone figure moved with a calm that defied the weight of the stares they were receiving. The Shaolin monk, robes flowing with each steady step, his bald head glistening under the artificial light, was the picture of serenity. Zovak's lips curled into a smirk. "So, these are the Earth fighters we've heard so much about." His voice, low and mocking, carried through the chamber. The soldiers around him chuckled, exchanging glances as if the entire situation were a joke. "I expected warriors, not monks and men in fabric." Liu's jaw tightened, but he remained composed. "The monk is here to demonstrate Earth's discipline and mastery of martial arts. We believe there's more to combat than just weaponry." Zovak raised a hand, silencing the human. His gaze locked on the monk. "You mean to say you can fight, without this?" He gestured to the plasma rifle in his hands, its energy core glowing ominously. "Without technology?" The monk's face remained impassive, his dark eyes unwavering. "I do not fight with weapons. I use my body and mind as one." The laughter that followed was harsh, metallic, and echoed mockingly throughout the arena. One of the soldiers, emboldened by the commander's taunts, stepped forward. "I'll take him," the soldier declared, confidence dripping from every syllable. His armor hissed as the servos activated, boosting his strength. "Let's see how much your body can withstand, monk." The monk stepped forward, his movements smooth and deliberate, as though even the act of walking was part of a deeper, practiced discipline. The galactic soldier loomed over him, more than twice his size in the bulky armor. He cracked his knuckles, each one amplified by the suit, and sneered. "Ready?" The monk bowed slightly in acknowledgement, saying nothing. The soldier lunged. His armored fist cut through the air, aimed directly at the monk's chest. Yet, the blow never landed. With a simple sidestep, the monk avoided the attack entirely, his body shifting like water flowing around a stone. The soldier growled, frustration already building. Another punch followed, then a third, each more forceful than the last. Each time, the monk moved with the same fluidity, never engaging, never retaliating, simply letting the soldier's momentum carry him further off balance. Zovak frowned. The room, once filled with laughter, had fallen into a tense silence. The soldiers watched, their earlier arrogance replaced with something resembling doubt. "Stand still!" the armored soldier barked, his voice strained with irritation. He swung again, this time with both fists, aiming to crush the monk beneath his weight. In a flash of movement, the monk was behind him, his hands calmly resting at his sides. "You rely too much on your armor," the monk said softly, his voice calm, as though he were addressing a student. The soldier turned, fury in his eyes. With a roar, he charged forward, intending to end the dance. But the monk, with a precision that defied belief, ducked low and swept his leg. The motion was quick, subtle, and efficient. The armored giant crashed to the ground with a resounding thud, his heavy suit clanging against the arena floor. The other galactic soldiers stared, their mouths agape. Zovak's frown deepened, but he said nothing. Without hesitation, the fallen soldier scrambled to his feet, anger radiating from him. He rushed the monk again, this time pulling a small plasma dagger from his belt. The blade hissed as it ignited, glowing with deadly energy. "No more tricks, monk!" The monk stood still, his hands raised slightly in front of him, palms open. The soldier slashed wildly, but every strike seemed to meet only air. The monk moved with a grace that made the soldier's attacks seem clumsy, almost childlike. In one fluid motion, the monk twisted, disarmed the soldier, and pressed 2 fingers to the center of the soldier's armor. There was a brief moment of stillness before the soldier staggered backward, the power in his suit flickering. The crowd gasped. The soldier's armor, once a symbol of his dominance, was now a cage trapping him. His systems malfunctioned, his strength-enhancing servos slowing him down. He looked helpless, a prisoner of the very technology he had mocked the monk for lacking. Zovak took a step forward, his face dark with disbelief. What did you do?" The monk lowered his hands, stepping away from the incapacitated soldier. "I simply redirected your energy. Your suit relies on force, but it lacks balance. Balance is everything." For the first time, the commander's smirk faded. His eyes narrowed as he studied the monk, realization dawning that this was not some mere human trick. This was something deeper, something his soldiers, with all their technology, had never encountered before. Without waiting for permission, Zovak unclasped his own armor, stepping into the arena. "Let's see if your balance holds up against a real opponent." The monk's gaze remained steady. "I do not fight to prove dominance," he said, bowing slightly. "But I will fight to teach a lesson." The tension in the arena was palpable now. Every galactic soldier leaned forward, watching with bated breath. The air crackled with anticipation as the 2 warriors, one reliant on the brute force of advanced technology, the other armed only with his mind and body, faced off. The battle had only just begun. Commander Zovak flexed his muscles as he shed the heavy armor, each movement precise and deliberate. His eyes remained locked on the monk, a mixture of suspicion and anticipation darkening his gaze. The arena, moments ago filled with mocking laughter, had descended into a tense silence. Every soldier now stood at attention, their amusement replaced by disbelief and curiosity. They had seen their commander dismantle opponents before, but this was different. There was something about the monk that unsettled even the most battle-hardened among them. "Impressive," Zovak said, rolling his shoulders. The absence of his usual smirk was palpable. "But I've yet to see what you can do when truly tested." The monk stood as still as stone, his hands at his sides, his expression unchanged. "I do not seek to prove myself, Commander. The lesson is for those who wish to learn." Zovak's jaw clenched. "And you'll find I'm a quick learner." With a sudden burst of speed, Zovak charged. His powerful frame, now unburdened by the armor, moved with shocking agility. The force of his momentum sent a shockwave through the ground, but the monk didn't flinch. Instead, his eyes tracked Zovak's approach with calm detachment. At the last moment, the monk shifted, allowing Zovak's strike to sail past him. The commander's fist cut through empty air, his force carrying him forward. The monk moved like water, his body seemingly weightless, flowing around Zovak's attacks. He used the commander's energy against him, deflecting every punch with minimal effort. Zovak growled, his frustration mounting. Each missed strike only made his movements more aggressive, his attacks more reckless. The soldiers watching could sense it too. Their leader, always in control, was now reacting purely out of pride. His fists came faster, heavier, yet still the monk evaded each one with infuriating ease. "You fight with strength, but without thought," the monk said, his voice barely above a whisper as he sidestepped another blow. "Your power is wasted on blind aggression." Zovak's face flushed with anger. He spun with a sweeping kick aimed to catch the monk off guard. But once again, the monk was gone, his robes fluttering like leaves in the wind as he effortlessly evaded. This time, however, the monk did not simply step aside. In one fluid motion, he extended a palm and tapped Zovak's chest, sending a pulse of energy through his body. The commander staggered back, his breath suddenly shallow, as if the air had been knocked from his lungs. For a moment, there was nothing but the sound of Zovak's labored breathing. He stared at the monk in shock, his mind trying to grasp what had just happened. How had such a light touch caused such a profound effect? "I used your own energy against you," the monk explained, his tone patient, as if speaking to a student. "Your strength is formidable, but it is unfocused. You rely on force, while I rely on balance." Zovak straightened, his pride burning hotter than the ache in his chest. He lunged again, this time aiming for the monk's legs. If he couldn't overpower him with brute strength, he'd take him down with speed. But just as his fingers grazed the monk's ankle, the ground beneath him shifted. In a blink, the monk had swept Zovak's feet out from under him, sending the commander crashing to the floor. The soldiers watching gasped, their disbelief palpable. Zovak, the greatest warrior in the fleet, lay on the ground at the mercy of a man who had not once struck him with force. The commander gritted his teeth and rose to his feet. His body ached, but his pride stung more. He couldn't lose, not like this, not in front of his men. With a roar of fury, he activated the shock gauntlets hidden beneath his sleeves. Electricity crackled to life, illuminating the arena with a harsh blue glow. Zovak's lips curled into a sneer. "Let's see you balance against this." He lunged forward, his fists sparking with electrical energy, every strike aimed to incapacitate. The monk's movements quickened, his body a blur of motion as he dodged the electrified blows. But Zovak was relentless, pushing the monk harder, faster, his gauntlets releasing arcs of energy with each missed punch. The monk's face remained calm, his breathing steady. With each step, he seemed to anticipate Zovak's movements, flowing around the electric strikes like water avoiding fire. And then, in a swift, decisive motion, the monk leaped forward, catching Zovak's wrist mid-swing. The sudden stillness was deafening. Zovak struggled, trying to pull free, but the monk's grip was firm. With a single, practiced motion, the monk redirected the energy from the gauntlets into the ground, neutralizing the charge. The crackling electricity fizzled out, leaving only the echo of the commander's labored breathing. The arena was silent once more. Zovak staggered backward, eyes wide, chest heaving. He had been bested, not by strength, but by something he could not understand, something he had never been taught. The monk released his grip and took a step back. "Combat is not just about defeating your opponent, Commander. It is about understanding them." Zovak's fists tightened, his pride bruised beyond repair, but somewhere beneath the frustration, there was something else. Respect. He had fought many battles, but none had left him feeling so humbled. The soldiers, still frozen in shock, stared in disbelief. Their commander, their symbol of strength and power, had been bested not by brute force, but by balance, precision, and mastery. Zovak inhaled deeply, nodding once. "You've taught me more in a few minutes than I've learned in a lifetime." The monk bowed slightly. "The lesson is never about the defeat. It is always about the understanding." Zovak remained still, watching the monk as if seeing him for the first time. "Perhaps we have much to learn from your ways after all." The monk smiled faintly, but said nothing more. As he stepped back into the shadows, the weight of the lesson lingered in the air. The soldiers, no longer jeering, stood in respectful silence. They had come expecting a show of force, and instead, they had witnessed the true strength of discipline. In the heart of the arena, Zovak remained standing, his pride wounded, but his mind open to a new possibility. The real fight had only just begun. The tension in the room was palpable. Commander Zovak's defeat had left a lingering silence in the arena, one that seemed to stretch far beyond the physical space. The Galactic soldiers, once full of swagger and bravado, now stood motionless, their confidence shaken by the spectacle they had witnessed. The monk, standing in the center of the room, remained serene. His breathing was calm, his posture relaxed, as if the battle that had just taken place was merely a brief interlude in his day. He showed no sign of exhaustion, nor did he carry the weight of victory. To him, this had never been about winning. "Commander," one of the soldiers finally broke the silence, his voice hesitant. "What now?" Zovak turned slowly, the weight of the question sinking in. His pride still burned, but beneath the surface, something else churned, curiosity. He had always believed in the power of technology, the superiority of brute strength. Yet here stood a man, a simple human, who had defied all that with nothing but discipline and mastery of his own body. It was a lesson that cut deeper than any wound. "We learn," Zovak said quietly, his voice filled with a new resolve. "We learn from him." The words hung in the air, a shift that no one had expected. The soldiers exchanged glances, unsure of how to respond. The thought of learning from an earthling, someone they had considered inferior, was unthinkable just hours ago. Yet they had seen it with their own eyes. There was no denying what the monk had demonstrated. Zovak stepped forward, approaching the monk with a look of determination. "You said combat is about understanding," Zovak began, his voice steady. "Teach us. Show us what we've been missing." The monk's dark eyes softened, as if he had been waiting for this moment. "Understanding begins with humility," he said. "You must first let go of the notion that power alone leads to victory." One of the soldiers, a younger recruit, scoffed from the side. "Let go of power? That's easy for someone who has none." The monk turned his head slightly, his gaze landing on the young soldier. "Power is not something you hold in your hand," he said gently. "It is something you cultivate within." Zovak raised a hand, silencing the soldier's retort. "We're listening." The monk nodded, his expression unreadable. "Then we begin with the basics." Over the next few hours, the arena transformed from a place of battle to a place of learning. The soldiers, still clad in their armor, watched as the monk demonstrated movements so simple, yet so effective, that they struggled to comprehend their impact. He moved with grace, flowing from one position to the next as if guided by an unseen force. Zovak joined in the training, trying to mimic the monk's movements. But the weight of his body, trained for power and speed, resisted the fluidity. He stumbled more than once, his muscles fighting against the unfamiliar motions. Frustration flickered across his face, but the monk remained patient. "Your body has been conditioned for force," the monk explained, his voice calm. "But you must learn to move with intention, not just strength. Each movement must have purpose." Zovak grunted, wiping sweat from his brow. "And what purpose does this serve in a real battle?" The monk smiled faintly. "Balance, Commander. A battle is not won by striking the hardest blow. It is won by knowing when to strike, and how to move before the blow comes." The tension in the room began to shift, curiosity overtaking the initial skepticism. The soldiers, once hesitant, now watched with growing interest as Zovak struggled through the exercises. Seeing their commander humbled had cracked open a door in their minds, one that the monk was quietly walking through. As the hours passed, the soldiers began to join in, their movements awkward at first, then slowly, gradually, more refined. They moved in unison, their heavy boots thudding against the floor as they tried to match the monk's elegance. Sweat dripped down their faces, frustration showing in their eyes, but they persisted. By the end of the session, the soldiers were exhausted. Their muscles ached from the unfamiliar motions, their minds racing with new concepts. Zovak, breathing heavily, turned to the monk. "I see now. Power without balance is nothing but wasted energy." The monk inclined his head. "You are beginning to understand. But balance is not just physical, Commander. It is also within the mind. You must control your emotions as you control your movements. Anger, pride, fear, these will cloud your judgment." Zovak exhaled, nodding slowly. "And how do we master that?" The monk's gaze was steady, but kind. "That is a path each of you must walk for yourselves. I can show you the way, but mastery comes from within." As the soldiers gathered their gear, ready to leave the arena, Zovak remained standing, his eyes fixed on the monk. "You've given us much to think about," he said quietly. "But I have one more question." The monk raised an eyebrow, waiting. Zovak hesitated for a moment, then spoke. "You've taught us balance, and I see the value in it. But what if an enemy refuses to fight by these rules? What if they rely on chaos, on unpredictability? How do we stand against that?" The monk's expression didn't change, but there was a flicker of something in his eyes, understanding, perhaps. "An opponent who relies on chaos reveals their weakness. Chaos is born of fear and desperation. Balance is born of calm and control. The one who remains centered in the storm will always have the advantage." Zovak nodded, a slow smile creeping onto his face. "Then we have much more to learn from you, monk." The monk's eyes softened, and he gave a slight bow. As long as you are willing to learn, the lessons will never end. Zovak, for the first time in a long while, felt something stir within him. Not pride, not anger, but a sense of possibility. Perhaps there was more to combat, more to life, than brute strength. And perhaps, just perhaps, this human monk held the key to unlocking that potential. The soldiers filed out of the arena, their minds buzzing with new ideas, their bodies aching from the unfamiliar exercises. But Zovak remained, watching the monk disappear into the shadows. The storm, it seemed, had only just begun. The sound of footsteps echoed through the dimly lit corridors as Commander Zovak made his way toward the training arena. His mind churned, replaying the lessons the monk had imparted over the last few days. The soldiers, once skeptical, had slowly come to embrace the new approach, but Zovak couldn't shake a lingering doubt. Was balance truly enough to face a real, unpredictable enemy? He had seen too many battles to believe that control alone could overcome chaos. As Zovak entered the arena, he found the monk sitting cross-legged in the center, his eyes closed, seemingly lost in meditation. The serenity of the moment unsettled Zovak. How could anyone remain so calm when the universe was filled with violence, uncertainty, and destruction? His thoughts twisted, a storm brewing beneath his exterior. The monk's eyes opened, as if sensing Zovak's inner turmoil. "You've come with questions." Zovak's jaw tightened. He wasn't here to meditate or find peace. "I've come to challenge what you've been teaching," he said, his voice edged with frustration. "This balance, it's all well and good in training. But in real combat, things don't follow a script. Battles are chaos. What happens when the enemy is unpredictable, when everything you've taught us falls apart?" The monk stood slowly, his movements deliberate, as if each step was part of a larger rhythm. He regarded Zovak with a calm intensity, the tension between them thickening. "Chaos is not the enemy," he said softly. "It is a test. A test of whether you can remain centered in the storm." Zovak's fists clenched. "And what if that's not enough? What if the storm consumes you?" The monk smiled, a faint, knowing smile that made Zovak's anger flare. "Then you have already given in to the chaos, Commander. You've allowed it to dictate your actions. Balance is not about control over your surroundings, it's about control over yourself." Before Zovak could respond, the arena's doors slid open with a hiss. One of his lieutenants burst in, his face pale. "Commander, we have a situation." Zovak turned sharply. "What is it?" "A hostile force, unidentified ships, just dropped out of hyperspace. They're targeting our station. They're moving fast." Zovak's heart raced. He turned back to the monk, his voice hard. "This is what I've been talking about. Balance won't save us from a fleet of warships." The monk's eyes held steady. "Perhaps. Or perhaps the chaos you fear is your greatest teacher." There was no time for further debate. Zovak stormed out of the arena, his mind whirling with thoughts of battle. The command center was already buzzing with activity when he arrived. Screens lit up, displaying the incoming ships, sleek, dark vessels moving in tight formation, their weapons systems lighting up like stars in the void. "Shields up," Zovak ordered. "Prepare for evasive maneuvers. I want every gun ready to fire." The soldiers scrambled to follow his orders, their training kicking in as they ready for the incoming onslaught. But even as the tactical preparations unfolded, Zovak couldn't shake the monk's words. Chaos is not the enemy. The first wave of energy blasts struck the station's shields, the impact reverberating through the hull. Zovak gritted his teeth, his focus narrowing on the tactical display. "Return fire. Target their lead ship." His orders were followed, but the enemy's formation didn't break. The ships moved with terrifying precision, coordinating their attacks in a way that left little room for countermeasures. It was as if they were reading every move Zovak made, staying one step ahead. "We're not making a dent!" one of his officers shouted. Zovak stared at the display, his frustration mounting. This wasn't a battle, it was a trap, and they were being toyed with. He slammed his fist on the console, the noise drawing the attention of every soldier in the room. "We need a new strategy." he muttered to himself. And then, without warning, he remembered the monk's teachings. A battle isn't won by brute force. It's won by understanding. Zovak's eyes narrowed, a plan forming in his mind. He activated the comms, his voice steady. Prepare for evasive maneuvers, but don't engage. I want all firepower redirected to defensive modes only. Let them come to us. His officers hesitated, confused. Sir, are you sure? Zovak nodded. Trust me. Just do it. The tension in the room shifted as the station's weaponry switched to defensive mode. The soldiers braced for the incoming fire, but Zovak stood still, his eyes fixed on the display. The enemy ships, now sensing the lack of counterattack, adjusted their formation, moving in closer. Closer. Zovak's heart pounded. He was counting on their overconfidence, their need to dominate the battle. The moment they closed the distance, he gave the order. Now! Full power to thrusters, break formation and split them down the middle! The station's thrusters roared to life, and in a burst of speed, the entire structure shifted, splitting the enemy formation in two. The sudden maneuver caught them off guard, and Zovak's forces capitalized on the confusion. They opened fire, targeting the weak points in the enemy's flanks. The battle quickly shifted in their favor. One by one, the enemy's ships faltered, their tight coordination unraveling in the face of unpredictability. Zovak felt a surge of triumph as the last of the hostile vessels retreated into the blackness of space, their attack repelled. Silence filled the command center. Zovak stood tall, his breathing steady, the taste of victory sharp on his tongue. But it wasn't the victory itself that lingered, it was the lesson. He had faced the storm, and in the midst of chaos, he had found clarity. Later, back in the arena, Zovak approached the monk, who was once again seated in quiet meditation. The commander's voice was calm, but filled with newfound understanding. You were right, he said. Chaos wasn't the enemy. I just had to see the pattern within it. The monk opened his eyes, his expression serene. You found your center, Commander. That is all that matters. Zovak smiled, a weight lifting from his shoulders. For the first time, he felt that the storm was not something to fear, but something to embrace. And in that storm, he had discovered his greatest strength. As he left the arena, the realization settled within him. This was only the beginning of a new journey. The galaxy held many more storms, but Zovak now knew how to navigate them. The storm, it seemed, had become his ally.